For those that don't know me, my name is Reverend Rachel Harrison, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm really nervous. I don't get nervous very often, but I'm nervous today because I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it. Something years ago, Rich and I came to this church. It was at a small school, and it was church in a box. And if anybody was a founder of that church or attended in the first 10 years, please stand up. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again, which is that it was the 7th anniversary of Columbine. And Rich and I had been church shopping, and I was raised Buddhist, and he was raised Christian. And we had finally found that we liked unity, and we were going to Boulder Unity. And then we heard there was another Unity church. I know some of you are here because there's another Unity church. There's 2 fabulous Unity churches in Boulder County. Aren't we lucky? Yes. So we went to the other Unity church because it was closer to our house, and we just wanted to see what it was. And we walked in on that day, and we felt at home, and we felt loved, and we felt something that we hadn't felt anywhere. And the story, which I've had confirmed, so I'm not crazy, is that they were talking about how someday they were going to build a church. And Rich, my husband, who's right here, stood up and said, "My name is Rich Harrison. I'm a stonemason, and I will help you build that church." And he did. He did. He built the waterfall, and he led volunteers. They did the patios. He worked with some Boy Scouts to put the wall that has the bell on it, and all of the retaining walls were done by people in this community, including my husband. As a matter of fact, they built these beams. One of the members designed this church. And we had members who were, finishing things and doing drywall. And we used to come on weekends, and we did all this stuff. And underneath this carpet is words of love written by this community. And I had the privilege and honor of working here for 2 years. And the truth was that they weren't all easy. And a year and a half ago, I came to a problem, and I struggled in my job here. And I never talked about it, and I never brought it up because what I have learned in my spiritual teachings and in the community that I'm building called Recover Your Soul is about the truth that we are responsible for our own process, and we're responsible for our own happiness. And at that time, my decision that I made was that I needed to process for myself what was happening, and I chose to leave and do Recover Your Soul, which some of you know about my online ministry. I'm incredibly blessed with what's going on. So when Janice left over a month ago, it brought a lot of chaos and hurt to this community. And my heart got broken, and it brought up all that stuff again for me, all of the feelings that I had a year and a half ago when I was in a situation. And I knew that I was talking today, and I knew I was going to be singing, a couple weeks after Janice left. And this part of me, to be honest, a part of me wanted to retreat and wanted to run away because it's hard to be in conflict, and it's hard to be in difficult emotions. And what I've learned in my spirituality is that I can do it. We can do hard things. We can stand in hard places. And so I was grateful to be able to come and offer healing and sing with Seth that Sunday. But for the last month, my brain has been welling with the content and the information. What am I to say today? How can I help heal this community? And I was gifted by the suggestion of a book. It's actually an Audible by Pema Chodron called Don't Bite the Hook. And I'd never heard of it before, and I hadn't listened to it. It's a series of talks that she gave over a weekend about Shanti Deva's teachings. And this is a Buddhist teacher, a monk from, I think he's from 700, so, 8th century, and that he had these teachings on patience. And as my heart was breaking, and you're getting phone calls and all this stuff is happening and there's all this misinformation and miscommunication, I listened to this book just with riveted emotion at what a gift it was from Spirit, and it reminded me that God's in charge. And what Pema Chodron talks about in this book, in this Audible, is so profound because this is our human experience. This center that was founded by our founders and continues to thrive and continues to be a place of connection is about us learning how to spiritually walk through anything, to be able to handle anything. And that if we can't do it here, how do we expect the leaders to do it? How can we be in governments where we want people to communicate and be kind to each other if we can't do it here, and we can't do it in our homes, and we can't do it in our relationships? So what I felt like that Pema Chodron gave me in this was such a beautiful reminder and such a beautiful gift of anger. And we all have anger. They call it Shampa in Buddhism. And that's that fire that starts to come up, that energy that starts to come up when we're being provoked, when we're being pushed. I got pushed a year and a half ago. I did. And the interesting thing is, when I look at that from the place that I am today, a year and a half later, I am grateful for the things that I learned from that situation that happened. And what I continue to be impressed with in all of these teachings, the Buddhist teachings, the Christian teachings, and the Eastern philosophies, all the things, Thich Nhat Hanh, I've just been filling myself up with all this stuff. Rich and I listen to Tao Te Ching, thank you, honey. Tao Te Ching every morning. As I fill myself with all these, it's the reminder that as human beings, we get attached. We get attached to our opinions. We get attached to our beliefs. And Buddha actually said we're addicted to ourselves, to our beliefs, to what we think the world should be like. And interestingly enough, Recover Your Soul is an online ministry that I've been building for the last 3 years that's around my healing from alcoholism and codependency and control addiction, right? So the control addiction is interesting because we can think that we know what's best for everybody else. I was pretty sure I knew exactly what was best for my husband. Just ask him. And what happened to me a year and a half ago here at Columbine was a recurring situation that I had had in my life already. I had worked at another job where I was office manager for 9 years. And for a good part of that was the most fulfilling thing that had ever happened in my life. That when life at our home had been really crappy for those years, I was filled up at work. It gave me so much of my identity of who I was. And a very similar thing happened in that job that happened in my working here. And the beauty of that was that I had this chance to look at that and say, common denominator, Rachel Harrison, right? What is it that I can do? We can get so caught up in thinking that our way is the only way. And we can get so caught up in this belief that somebody else is wrong. And this entire listening of Pema Chodron is this, and I recommend it for everybody, it's on Audible, is this phenomenal walk through the path of this thing that comes up in us that everybody has. So it's not about judging yourself and saying, oh, well, I'm not angry. We are all angry. We all have aggression. But what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do when we have a situation like happened here at church where something happened? Something happened between Janice and the staff and the minister team. Something happened. And so we pull sides. And as human beings, we generally go around and try to get people on our team. Come over on my team. I was right. Come on my team. I was right. They're right. They're wrong. And the truth is that underneath all of that is pain. What I love in Thich Nhat Hanh's Fear is he really comes down to this place where he said, fear is pain. And we have this part of us that has belief systems that have been brought up since we were kids, right? So when my button got pushed that was my value button, the management here wasn't the first person to push that button. I've had that button pushed a lot of times, and every time someone pushes that button, I react in a certain way. I respond in a certain way. That champa comes up, that defensive nature, that desire to defend. We all have it, right? So what the Buddhist teachers are saying is instead of us getting so wrapped up and so caught in like, I'm right and you're wrong, and this, what Janice did was right, and what Sue did was wrong, or what the board did was wrong, or what this was right, none of that actually matters. If we can actually come from a place of peace and healing and understanding. The Course in Miracles tells us that our suffering comes from the belief that we're separate, that we are separate from our brothers and sisters, that we are separate from God. And every time a situation comes up, either in our marriage or with our kids or with our friends or with our community or with the government or with the world, where we think we're separate and we demand that somebody is right and somebody is wrong, we suffer. We hurt. We hurt deeply. And we can be so strong in our convictions. We can really think that what happened to me was wrong or that what was said was not okay. And what the Course in Miracles teaches us is that that is our projection, that is what we in our minds think. And so Pema Chodron talks about mind training, that we need to learn how to train our minds to not go to that huge projection where we take sides, where we make someone the villain. There's no villain here. There was no villain in my leaving, and there is absolutely no villain here in this community either. Janice is an incredible human being who gave to this community for years. And my hope is that we can always have people come back who have felt like it has been hurtful to them. And there's people, for all the years that we've been here, things don't always go that great, to be honest. We're just human beings. This isn't the first time there's been weirdness, Those of us, the founders who have been here, we've had a multitude of ministers. We've had a multitude of office staff. We've had a multitude of, running the children's program. And this is constantly changing and evolving because this is a community center. This is not a minister-centered church. That's what it was founded on. It was founded on a community-centered church. And that people will come and go. And I always love it when I see somebody who comes in that hasn't been here for like 10 years, And you're like, hey, good to see you. Where have you been? Instead of, well, what, you haven't been here for 10 years. Where have you been? So this belief that we need to create somebody who is at fault is really our ego and our human experience. That all the spiritual teachers, all of the lessons are around being flexible, being open, being curious. And one of the biggest gifts that's happened in my life, in my recovery from control addiction, and I'm not perfect at it, Rich will tell you, is being a better listener. Thich Nhat Hanh talked a huge amount in the Fear book about being a compassionate, kind listener. And generally what we're doing is we're listening to the other person and formulating our attack, you know? Oh, I'm going to say this, and that wasn't right, and what about this? And we're not even really allowing that person to have their whatever it is. And their whatever it is may be crap. You know, they may really be in a space where they're just vomiting up all their fear and all their pain and all their stuff. And they may be saying things at you. Pema Chodron talks about Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Is that what it's To Kill a Mockingbird? And that scene where he's in front of the jail and someone spits in his face. And he doesn't do anything. He chooses to just let it go and to move aside. And she talks about this passage a lot because the truth is, in our lives, we have people who spit in our face all the time. And then we can decide how we're going to work on it. What she talks about in the Don't Bite the Hook, and I think I said this last time I was here, I actually love this because addiction, the sign for addiction is hook. Don't bite the hook. So every time someone says something to you, or emotionally or physically or whatever, spits in your face, we have this chance of, are we going to bite the hook? You know, oh, this thing happened with Janice. Who's right and who's wrong and what happened? We are biting a hook. If I'm fighting with my husband, I can go to my girlfriends and I can say, I can't believe what Rich did. And they're like, oh, what'd he do? You know, we're in the hook. What I love is that Pema Chodron and Thich Nhat Hanh and Tao Te Ching, you know, Lao Tzu, and Jesus. Anybody watching The Chosen? So Rich and I watched the last episode of season 3 last night, and I'm glad I watched it because it's basically Jesus goes to Damascus, thank you, Damascus, and they're up in arms because they've heard one of his stories from his disciples. And there's like 3 or 5 different factions of people that are there. And they're fighting over this story. They're fighting over what the lesson is supposed to be. And they're pointing the finger at each other. And if you hadn't done this, and if you hadn't done that, and they're bad, and blah, 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 right? What we do, that shampa, that thing that comes up and like demands that somebody's at fault here. And he gets them all to sit down and he starts teaching about love, about acceptance, about forgiveness, about loving your brother. And then he does the loaves and the fishes, you know, and makes a whole bunch of food for them and feeds everybody, thousands of people, sends them off on their way. Now they're just chatting and talking, you know. We have this opportunity to use this energy that comes up in us to actually heal. And most of us don't actually get to the next level of our healing unless we hit the wall. We have to be in pain and suffering to be willing to change. And generally what we want is we want you to change, and I want you to change, and if you would change, and for sure you, Johnny, you need to change. In soul recovery, my first step in soul recovery is admitted we were powerless over everything outside of ourselves. Admitted we were powerless over everything outside of ourselves. And that our pain and suffering comes from our desire to control these things. When we are in a place where we want control, we want it to show up, we're in pain. So the truth is, also in that episode of The Chosen, Simon's wife has had a miscarriage, and he's angry at Jesus. He's saying, how can you heal all these people that you don't know? And my wife suffered. My wife and my family suffered. I'm your person, and why wouldn't you help me? And what Jesus says is, we don't know faith, we don't know healing, we can't see the truth unless we have suffering. So what Pema Chodron talks about is that when you are in a place where you are really hurting, you actually have a chance to heal. So we can either choose fear, the road of fear, and say, I'm going to be angry and it's going to be their fault and, them. Or we can say, this is my opportunity to look within. This is my opportunity to, and in her words of Buddhism, to burn the seeds of karma. How profound is that? To burn our seeds of karma by allowing ourselves to be in our complexity, to allow ourselves to be in the pain, to be in discomfort, to not choose to lash out, to not choose to be judgmental, to not choose to justify, but to choose ourselves and our own healing and looking at ourself. What do I need to learn from this? How can I be more compassionate? How can I have done that situation better? I could have done the situation with Sue a year and a half ago way better. I have a big part to play in that. And I used one of the tools and gifts of, it is just like me. And I think Sue's mentioned that one before. Just like me. Sue wants a beautiful community of people who are healed just like me. Sue wants to be a great minister just like me. The board wants everything to be good for this community just like me. When we use that tool, which I used in my old situation as well, it was profoundly healing to me because it took that person that I was putting as an other, as a harmer, and I put the responsibility on myself and said, it is as I choose to see it. It is as I choose to see it. And it doesn't mean that people don't say hurtful things, like we're talking about this spitting in the face, right? It means that I am going to use this to burn up my karmic seeds. I'm going to use this to be able to be present in something that is hurtful. I'm going to choose to be forgiving. The Course in Miracles is all about forgiving, and not forgiving from that place that says, what you did was really crappy, but I forgive you and I'm just going to let it go. That's not what the Course in Miracles says. What the Course in Miracles says is that actually we are pure and whole, that our souls are united with Spirit, that we are these holy, magnificent human beings, spiritual beings in this human body, and it is our humanness that is the pain. It is our humanness that is the hurt, and it's the humanness that chooses harm over an awareness that they can be healed from it. That once we realize we don't need the pain, it leaves us. So that comes from curiosity. And it comes from being willing to let go of what we perceive as the right or the only way. I wanted to read something. I was looking for a passage from the Course this morning. And this is from lesson 352, and it says, judgment and love are opposites. From one comes all the sorrows of the world, but from the other comes the peace of God himself. Judgment and love are opposites. It goes on to say, judgment will blind my eyes and make me blind. Yet love reflected in forgiveness reminds me you have given me a way to find peace again. So if we want to have the world be different, we have to start by being different within our hearts. We have to be willing to have real conversations and bring things out in the open and talk about them. Rich and I separated for a year about 10 years ago. And one of the things that I remember him saying was, you told everybody else how miserable you were and you didn't tell me. How can I be different if you don't tell me what's really going on with you? And we do that in community. We here at Columbine have niced each other to death sometimes. We're such nice people. We are literally the nicest people. But we all have our own stuff. We're working on our own stuff. We have our own emotions and our own childhoods and our own perceptions and our own hurts and our own insecurities. And if we can't be strong enough, if we can't have enough courage to come into an environment where it is safe here, to share our thoughts, to be the one that just is, throwing up all of their pain, and have people who can compassionately listen and have curiosity and have open-heartedness, then we can't heal out in the world. And so it felt important to me to be able to just talk about it, I want Janice to be able to come back and be the lovely, amazing person she was. As we were cleaning up her office, only thing she talked about was how much she loved this community, how grateful she was for how much she learned here and what a gift it was to be here. That's the only thing that came out of her mouth in that hour that we packed up her office. And we have things, and we can come from our pain and we can do all that. Sue was a phenomenal leader and spiritual leader of this community. And she wants nothing but the best for every single person here. And she gives of herself like nobody I've ever seen. She is so, so hardworking, so devoted. So it isn't about picking. It's not about picking who's right or who's wrong. And do that here. What she says in Don't Bite the Hook is, we have to practice on the little stuff. You have to practice in the car when you're driving and that person, cuts you off. When you're in traffic, she talks about a story about being in traffic and you're like competing with that lane next to you, I'm not gonna let you in here. That those little things, that those micro moments where the shampa comes up and that aggression comes up, if we can be with it there, if you can be with it with your husband or your wife when they're doing that one annoying thing, Rich taps on the glass with his finger while we're watching TV. I just give him the look. But you practice on those little things. You practice on the things that really don't matter, so that when that smaller next thing comes, you have the ability to be in your discomfort. You're burning the seeds of your karma. You're opening to the fullness of who you are. You're remembering that you are all one. You are remembering that there is no separation. And then when the next bigger thing happens and something at work happens or something in your community happens, you know how to feel these feelings. You know how to not bite the hook. You know how to be compassionate. You know how to allow yourself to be in pain. I was in a lot of pain for this last month. And that, in the end, is healing for me. I get to look at a lot of stuff for myself. And I'm grateful for that. And I know that God's in charge. That this is the house of spirit. That there are no mistakes. I am so grateful I left a year ago when I did my business. Fabulous. I was scared to do that. I was afraid to leave because I was afraid I wasn't good enough. I wasn't going to make it. And if I hadn't had that wall that I hit that made me leave when I did, I wouldn't be there right now. I'd be further back. And what's right for Janice is happening for Janice. And what's right for Columbine is happening for Columbine. Aren't we lucky? But I just invite us to look honestly at our own parts and how we get affected and the choices that we make, and to consistently choose compassion and love and be willing to talk about and be in hard things. And that this community is too valuable to let sides get drawn. Too important for too many people. Let's stay together and hold everybody in love for Columbine. Thank you.